Welcome back to the channel where we bring you the most terrifying true ghost stories. This story comes from our community member Hannah. She asks that we don't use her real name, so let's just call her Hannah. I'll let her take it away. I bought my first house when I was 23 years old. It was a foreclosure in a not-so-great part of town, but it was cheap and I had no money. The house needed a lot of work, but I have a degree in architecture, so I was more than capable of doing most of the work myself. The house was huge. It was probably originally built in the 1950s, and it was over 2,500 square feet with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. The layout was odd, and there were weird little nooks and crannies all throughout the house. In the kitchen, for example, there was this random room off to the side that was barely big enough to stand up in. I'm pretty sure it was used for canning or preserving food at some point in the past. I've since converted it into a pantry. The second floor had an odd layout, too. There was one large room above the garage that was split into 2 bedrooms by the previous owners. They had put up a shoddy wall down the center of the room, and each side had its own closet and a window. Neither closet had doors, and both were basically just storage spaces. No one ever slept in either of them. The walls were paper thin, and the room itself was also very small, maybe 8 by 10 feet. From the second floor landing, you could see directly down the hallway and straight through the front door. This made perfect sense since the original owner probably wanted to be able to see anyone who walked up to his front door. But in modern times, it meant that any noise coming from outside the house could be seen from inside. The doorbell, the knock of a visitor, the slamming of the front door if someone forgot to close it properly. Even a car backfiring could be seen and heard through the open doorway. For me, this wasn't much of a problem because I never really had any visitors. Most of the time I lived alone. Then about 8 months after moving in, I started seeing this tall, lanky, pale guy with messy brown hair walking up my driveway at night. He would always seem to appear out of nowhere and vanish just as quickly. I didn't think anything of it at first. I live in a college town, and there are a lot of students around. I just assumed he lived in one of the houses nearby, and that he was just taking a shortcut through my yard to get home. One night I was home alone, and I must have been reading or watching TV while lying down, because the next thing I know, I hear someone ringing my doorbell. I opened my eye, sat up and listened intently. I heard the doorbell ring again. I got up and walked to the window facing the front door and saw nothing. I walked out into the hall and looked out the front door. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary except for the fact that my blinds were closed and the doorbell had been wired incorrectly, so it would unworked unless I went outside and pushed the button myself. I walked outside and looked around. My house is set back quite a ways from the road, and there isn't much to see except for the neighbors' houses. The only way someone could possibly be hiding between my house and my neighbor's was if they were underground. I looked down and saw no footprints in the grass or disturbed earth. I checked the security lights and they were working. I went back inside and locked all the doors. I decided I was probably just being paranoid and went back to whatever I was doing before. In the morning, I got up and went to look out the front window. I was surprised to see that there were tire tracks in the soft dirt road in front of my house. And although I couldn't make out the license plate, I could tell that the car that had been parked in front of my house the night before belonged to one of my neighbors. I thought maybe I was wrong about him taking a shortcut. Maybe he was the one who was trying to sneak into my house. I felt a little bit better knowing that it was just a case of a nosy neighbor. But I was still wary whenever I saw the guy walking past my house during the day. Then one night I was woken up by the sound of screams. Big guttural screams. I jumped out of bed and ran to the closet to hide, assuming that it was an intruder. After a few minutes, the commotion outside my window stopped and I slowly made my way to the front door, keeping low to the floor to avoid being seen. As I approached the front door, I could hear what sounded like hail for a few seconds, followed by heavy footsteps near my front door. I froze! Hailstones were the size of my fist and hitting the roof. I could hear someone walking around on my porch. Knocks, knocks, knocks. Someone was trying to open my front door. I backed away from the door and hid in the corner of the hallway. The scratching continued and then stopped. I waited and listened, but everything was silent. Finally, I crept back toward the front door, which was now slightly ajar. I peeked outside and saw nothing. Then I noticed something strange. A single baseball cap sat on the step in front of my door. It was a plain black cap with no logo or design on it. I was confused, but curious. So I picked it up and walked to the window to look outside. I saw my neighbor's car in the street and figured that maybe I should go check on him. It was summer and the windows in my house don't have screens. And as I was looking out one of them, I accidentally knocked it open. It made a loud creaking noise. Startled, I slammed the windows shut and hurried downstairs. As I rounded the corner of the staircase, I heard a crash from the room that I had been keeping empty. Curious, I walked in to find my lamp on the floor, shattered into 1,000 pieces. I remember standing there frozen, staring at the broken lamp on the floor, wondering how it could have been broken. There was no way anyone could have entered the room without me hearing them come in. I lived in that house alone. I hadn't had any visitors in weeks. I was desperate to believe that there was a logical explanation for what I had seen and heard. But deep down, I knew that I was dealing with something I couldn't explain. After this incident, I sealed off the ground floor, boarded up the windows, and reinforced the front door. At night, I could still hear scratching at my windows and doors, but it was only ever when I was asleep. Whenever I was awake, there was always total silence. If I went to the window to look out, there was never anyone there. Sometimes when I woke up, I would see new scratches on the boards covering the windows. Every time I saw these marks, I felt a deep sense of dread, knowing that whatever was out there was getting more desperate. Over the next few weeks, things started to escalate. Sometimes I would wake up to the sound of scratching. Other times I would hear chains dragging metal moans. One night, I heard what sounded like whispers right outside my window. They were hushed voices speaking in a language that I couldn't understand. Another night, I heard what sounded like screams and pleas for mercy. It was enough for me. I had taken the steps necessary to protect myself from intruders. But what was I supposed to do about whatever this was? I packed a bag and left the house. I didn't want to stay there alone. But whenever I came back to clean or check on things, I found more damage. Drawers and cabinets that I had emptied out and locked were wide open. The floors were covered in what looked like blood. Stained glass was shattered everywhere. There were times when I would walk in and feel a cold spot and hear my name being called. It took me 2 years to finally sell the house. By that time, the whole place needed to be gutted. I didn't have the money to do it myself, so I left it in that condition. Whoever or whatever had been trapped in that house with me had what? That was our haunted house story. Did you like it? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our newest episodes. We've got one coming up that you're really not gonna want to miss. We'll see you next time.